"You're not invited to the wedding, Dad. It'll ruin the vibe." That's what my son told me, his eyes cold, his voice steady like he was reading off a script. I had to steady myself against the kitchen counter, not from age, but from the weight of what he'd just said. This was the same boy I taught to ride a bike, who used to cry when I left for work. And now? He was marrying someone I barely knew, in a venue I unknowingly still owned. They planned the whole thing without me. But I wasn't done yet. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. There was a time when Evan wouldn't go to bed unless I carried him upstairs on my shoulders. Every night, without fail, he'd grab my hand after dinner and say, "Airplane time." I'd groan and pretend my back couldn't handle it, but we both knew I loved it. He'd sit up there, giggling and waving his arms, as I made engine sounds and zoomed him around the hallway before finally tucking him in. Those were the good years, before he grew too heavy, before the world started pulling him away from home. Back then, it was just the three of us, me, Marjorie, and our boy. Marjorie had this way of filling a room without saying a word. She'd hum while cooking, and somehow it made the whole house feel warmer. She used to say, "A quiet home is a strong one. It means peace lives here." And for a long time, it did. I worked construction, 30 years with the same company, rain or shine. My hands have never been pretty, but they built everything that mattered in my life. The house we lived in? I laid every brick myself. That land was a patch of overgrown weeds when I bought it, but I saw something in it. With Marjorie by my side, we made it into a home. When Evan came along, everything shifted. We built his nursery together. She picked the colors, I hung the shelves, and we both sat on the floor when it was done, just looking around like we couldn't believe it was real. I was never the loud or flashy kind of father. I didn't throw big birthday parties or take us on expensive vacations, we couldn't afford those. But Evan never lacked anything. He had books, warm meals, a solid roof, and two parents who loved him more than life. Marjorie was the heart of our family, though. She had this patience I could never quite master. When Evan messed up, she didn't raise her voice, she just looked at him in that way that made him want to do better. She'd say, "Remember who you are, baby. You're better than this." And he'd try. For her. Even after she passed. God, even now, I still catch myself reaching for her side of the bed. It's been 7 years. Cancer took her quickly. One day she was weeding the garden, and 2 months later, she was gone. She asked me to keep the house just the way it was. "Don't let them tear it apart when I'm gone," she whispered, holding my hand in that hospital bed. I promised her I wouldn't. For a while, Evan was just as broken up as I was. He moved back in for a bit to help me cope. We'd sit in silence sometimes, eating cereal for dinner, just trying to feel normal. He cried in the garage once, I never told him I saw. Those months were strange but beautiful. I thought we were closer than ever. We'd talk about his childhood, about his dreams. He said he wanted to start his own business, maybe work in real estate. I offered to help, told him I'd back him financially if he needed it. He shook his head at the time, said he wanted to earn it himself. Looking back, that might have been the last truly honest moment between us. Eventually, he met Lily. She came over a few times. Polite, at first. A little standoffish. Marjorie would have said she had a tight smile, you know, the kind that looks like it's painted on. But I didn't judge. If she made Evan happy, that was enough for me. I remember one Sunday, not long after they got engaged, Evan pulled me aside and said, "Dad, I know Mom always wanted the house to stay in the family. Someday, Lily and I would love to raise kids here." I felt a lump in my throat. "That's all I ever wanted," I told him. At the time, I didn't see anything wrong with that dream. In fact, it gave me hope, made me feel like Marjorie's spirit might still walk these halls through new little footsteps and laughter. I pictured myself sitting on that same porch swing, rocking a grandbaby while the sun went down. But there were small cracks even then. Little things I brushed aside. Like how Lily would roll her eyes when I told old stories. Or how Evan suddenly seemed embarrassed when I hugged him in public. I chalked it up to growing pains, the awkward shifting of roles as children become adults. I thought maybe I was just holding on too tight. So I gave them space. I paid for their engagement dinner, offered to cover some of the wedding. Evan declined politely. I figured he wanted independence, thought that was a good sign. A man should want to stand on his own feet. Still, I started noticing how little they included me in plans. When I asked about the wedding venue, Evan just shrugged and said, "It's handled." When I offered to help build anything, an arch, a gazebo, he said they were going a different route. More modern, he called it. That stung more than I admitted. But again, I didn't push. I've always believed in letting people make their own choices. Even if it means watching them walk away. But now, looking back at those moments, Lily's subtle comments, Evan's distance, their private planning, it all fits into a pattern I refuse to see. They weren't building a future that included me. They were carving out a new life and leaving me behind in the dust. I used to think love, effort, and sacrifice guaranteed a seat at the table. Turns out, sometimes love gets overwritten by ambition. And sometimes, the very people you raise forget who built the table in the first place. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. The way Evan started calling me old man in front of Lily, laughing like it was just a joke. The way she'd glance at me when I talked too long, like I was taking up too much air in the room. I brushed it off. People change, I thought. Maybe I was being sensitive. Maybe I just missed how things used to be. But the warmth in Evan's eyes, it wasn't always there anymore. It started small. One night, he and Lily came over for dinner. I'd cooked pot roast, Marjorie's old recipe. Evan used to love it. When I brought it to the table, Lily looked at it like I'd served her a plate of wet newspaper. "Is this beef?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. Evan laughed. "Dad's stuck in the 50s, Lil. Everything's meat and potatoes." I chuckled along, trying not to let it sting. But it did. That roast had taken hours. Later that night, I heard Lily say in the hallway, "You've got to start setting boundaries with him." Boundaries. That word echoed in my head for days. I didn't see Evan much after that. Weeks would pass without a call. When I did hear from him, it was always quick. "Hey, just checking in," or, "Can't talk long, we're swamped." I understood that life gets busy. But I also knew he made time for what mattered. And it wasn't just emotional distance anymore. There was a shift in tone. One afternoon, he came by to borrow a few tools. Said they were renovating their new apartment. "Mind if I take the power drill?" he asked, already halfway into the shed. "Sure," I said. "Just bring it back when you're done." He glanced over his shoulder. "You always say that, like I'm not gonna return it." It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them, like I was annoying. Like I was just a man with stuff he needed. I stood in the doorway for a while after he left, holding Marjorie's old mug. I hadn't even gotten a thank you. There were other signs. Subtle ones. They stopped inviting me to things. I heard about their engagement party through a neighbor, not from Evan himself. When I asked him about it, he said, "Oh, it was just something Lily's friends put together. You wouldn't have liked it. Loud music and dancing. Not really your scene. Not really your scene." It was a strange thing to hear from your own child, as if you'd become a foreigner in their life. Still, I tried. I offered to help with wedding prep. "If you need anything built, I'm happy to lend a hand." He shook his head quickly. It's all being handled professionally, Dad. You've done enough. That phrase stuck with me, you've done enough. I wasn't being excluded because they didn't need help. I was being excluded because they didn't want me involved. I remember sitting alone in the garage one evening, staring at the old workbench. Evan and I used to build toy boats there. One summer, we made a treehouse from scratch. He called it the Hawk's Nest. Said it made him feel like a superhero up there. Now he was planning an entire life without me, and I didn't know where I'd gone wrong. Then came the finances. Evan asked for a small loan to cover unexpected moving costs. I wired him the money, $5,000, no questions asked. No contract, no interest. Just trust. 2 months later, I mentioned it casually. Don't worry, he said, waving it off. We'll pay you back after the honeymoon. I never asked again. And I never saw a cent. It wasn't the money. It was the principle. Evan used to be the kind of boy who saved up allowance money to buy Marjorie a Mother's Day card. Now he was the kind of man who accepted a $5,000 gift and couldn't be bothered to say thank you. Maybe Lily changed him. Maybe she didn't. The more I watched them together, the more I saw how she steered things. She had a sharp tone when she spoke to him. Directed his answers, interrupted him mid-sentence. He went along with it, grinning, nodding, trying to keep the peace. At least, that's what I told myself. But the real shift came the day they dropped by unexpectedly. I was pruning the rose bushes out front. Marjorie loved those. Lily stepped out of the car in high heels, looking at the house like she was sizing it up. This place could use a little modernization, she said, loud enough for me to hear. Evan didn't correct her. He didn't say a word. They walked through the house, talking about natural light and opening up the kitchen. I followed behind like a stranger in a museum exhibit. At one point, Evan said, we could take out this wall, make it an open floor plan. I raised an eyebrow. We? He hesitated. Well, someday. When it's time. When it's time for what? He looked at Lily, then back at me. Nothing. Just, you know. Down the road. I nodded slowly. Said nothing more. But inside, something started to sink. They were planning for a future in my house. And they weren't planning to share it. The truth was settling in, like winter creeping through the cracks. My son, the boy I carried on my shoulders, who cried in my arms when he lost his first dog, was no longer looking at me as a father. He was looking at me as an obstacle. And whether he realized it or not, he'd already started pushing me out. It happened at a Sunday dinner I wasn't even supposed to host. Lily had called earlier that week and said, we should all eat together one last time before things get busy. I asked what she meant by one last time, but she just laughed and said, oh, you know. Wedding madness. I spent all day preparing Marjorie's lasagna recipe, her signature dish. I even used the old casserole dish she loved, the one with the little chip on the corner. Set the table with the good silverware, cleaned the porch, even put on a collared shirt. They arrived late, as usual. Lily didn't say hello. Evan mumbled something about traffic, barely glancing at me as he walked in. Things started off civil, though the air was tight. Conversation bounced awkwardly between wedding details and real estate talk. Lily did most of the talking. Evan nodded like a background character in his own life. Then came the moment. We just finished dessert when Lily stood up and said, so, we've been thinking. I looked up from my coffee, already uneasy. She continued, after the honeymoon, we'd like to move in here for a little while. Just until we get things settled financially. The room froze. I blinked. Move in, here? She smiled that tight, rehearsed smile. Yes. It just makes sense, don't you think? It's a bit wasteful for you to be rattling around in such a big house all by yourself. Evan cleared his throat. We could help with upkeep, Dad. Take care of the place. I put down my cup. So where would I go? Lily looked genuinely confused. We assumed you'd want to downsize anyway. There's a nice assisted living community just 20 minutes away. One of Lily's friend's grandparents moved there, Evan added, like that made it better. My hands went cold. You assumed, I said, slowly, that I'd just leave my home? Lily tilted her head. Well, Evan said you hadn't been doing great. That the house is getting to be too much. I turned to my son. You said that? He looked away, then shrugged. I was just trying to make things easier for everyone. I sat there, stunned, while the two of them kept talking like I wasn't in the room. Like I was a problem being passed off to someone else. Like I was a piece of old furniture that needed moving out. I couldn't believe it. I had buried my wife in the same church they were getting married in. I had built this house with my bare hands. And now, I was being told, casually, over coffee and dessert, that I didn't belong here anymore. That this life I'd poured everything into had an expiration date. And it had already passed. I stood up and walked out to the porch. The air was thick with humidity. I leaned on the railing, watching the oak tree I planted the year Evan was born. It had grown tall, strong. Rooted. I heard the door creak behind me. Dad, Evan said, quiet. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was tight, my heart hammering. He stepped closer. It's just. Lily and I need space to grow. You've had your time here. That was the line that did it. You've had your time here. Like I was a relic. A temporary resident in the very life I created. I didn't say another word that night. They left soon after. No one mentioned the lasagna I'd spent hours preparing. No one thanked me. No one hugged me goodbye. I sat on the porch long after they drove away. The cicadas buzzed, and a storm rolled in from the east. I let the rain hit me. I didn't move. The next morning, I didn't water the garden. I didn't read the paper. I just stared at the house, my house, and felt something break loose inside me. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was grief. Grief for the boy I raised. For the woman I missed every day. For the life we built, now being picked apart by cold hands and careless hearts. I walked through each room slowly. Touched the kitchen counter where Marjorie used to roll dough. Opened the closet where Evan's old toys still sat in a plastic bin labeled, Keep. I ran my hand along the banister I carved myself, one winter long ago when we couldn't afford anything new. And then, in the living room, I sat down in Marjorie's chair and stared at her photo on the mantel. I'm so sorry, I whispered. Because somewhere along the line, I had let this happen. I had let our legacy become a stepping stone for someone else's convenience. That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery and sat beside her grave. They want the house, I told her. They want our house. The wind rustled the trees. A bird landed nearby, chirped once, then flew off. And in that silence, I remembered her last words to me. Don't let them tear it apart. I felt my jaw tighten. My hands curled into fists. No. I wasn't going to let them. Not now. Not ever. A few days after that dinner, I started noticing things. Little shifts. A missing copy of my house key. A folder in Evan's handwriting tucked behind the TV cabinet. Lily had left her planner open on the dining room table once, maybe by accident, maybe not. I wasn't one to snoop, but that day, something in me cracked. I flipped through it. Color-coded tabs. vendor contact lists, seating charts. And then, under a tab labeled Post-Wedding Plan, a list that stopped me cold. Move in by September 15th. Change locks. Begin demo in kitchen, ask Evan's uncle for quote. Check with Dad's doctor about eligibility for assisted care. Storage unit 4, old furniture. My hands went numb. I sat in that chair for a long time, staring at the list like it would change. Like if I blinked enough, it would disappear. They weren't just planning to move in. They were planning to erase me. One step at a time. The part about checking with my doctor, that cut deeper than anything else. I'd been to one appointment recently for arthritis in my knees. I mentioned feeling a little tired lately. Evan had driven me there. He must have told her. That small moment, just me being honest with my son, had become ammunition. And that's when I realized. This wasn't just selfishness. This wasn't just poor judgment. It was a scheme. And I was the mark. Later that evening, I went up into the attic. It smelled of cedar and dust, the kind of smell that stays in your clothes after you leave. I hadn't been up there since Marjorie passed. Her boxes were still untouched. I opened one. Inside were old letters, photo albums, her teaching certificates, and her handwritten journal. I found one page with a folded letter marked, "For when they come for the house." I didn't even remember her writing that. My hands shook as I opened it. This place holds more than walls and windows. It holds our promises, our struggles, our story. If they forget that, remind them. But if they try to steal it, don't argue. Just make sure they lose what they tried to take. You've always been the patient one. That's your weapon. I read that page 3 times. That's when I stopped feeling helpless. I started watching. Listening. Noticing what I hadn't noticed before. Evan and Lily were sloppy with their assumptions. They spoke more freely around me now, as if I'd already been mentally cleared from their lives. It was in the way Evan tossed his jacket on my favorite chair without asking. The way Lily opened drawers like they already belonged to her. One afternoon, I overheard them on the porch, thinking I was out in the garden. "Evan, do you think he suspects anything?" Lily, "No. He's just slow. Sweet, but slow. He'll probably be relieved to have less responsibility." Evan, "Yeah. I just hope he doesn't make it weird." Lily, "We'll give him options. He'll feel like it's his choice." I stood just inside the hallway, hearing my son's voice, not mean, not cruel. Just calculating. Detached. That was worse, somehow. He wasn't being manipulated. He was fully participating. I remembered when he got caught stealing a comic book in 6th grade. He came home in tears. Marjorie didn't yell. She sat him down and asked, "Is this who you want to become?" He sobbed and said no. That boy was gone now. And in his place stood a man who could plan my removal like a business strategy. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea, going through the house trust documents Marjorie and I had signed 15 years ago. I'd almost forgotten, the venue Evan and Lily had booked for their wedding. That little barn-turned-event hall on Maple Hill? It was technically still part of Marjorie's estate. I'd inherited it through the trust. Evan had always called it the old wedding barn, but he didn't know the paperwork had never transferred. He must have assumed it was just some property left idle, like everything else he took for granted. That night, I pulled out the folder from the safe. Trust deed. Property tax receipts. Ownership transfer papers, unsigned. Everything I needed to confirm that legally, that venue was still mine. And suddenly, I saw it. A way to remind him. Not through yelling or punishment. But through truth. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at the table. I was going to own the table they planned to sit at. But I wouldn't act out of anger. I wouldn't stoop to spite. No, I'd follow Marjorie's advice. Be patient. Let them build the illusion. Let them believe I was stepping aside. And then, when it mattered most, I'd show them just how wrong they were. Speech balloon. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. The next time Evan came over, I was sitting on the porch with the house papers on my lap. Not spread out. Just enough showing to make him curious. I wasn't ready to confront him, not directly, but I needed to see how deep he'd gone. He pulled into the driveway, stepped out of his car, and gave a quick glance toward the documents. Still going through the old stuff? He asked, trying to sound casual. I nodded. Just cleaning up the past. He didn't ask what I meant. Didn't want to. Instead, he launched into small talk. Lily's meeting with the florist this afternoon. She's overwhelmed, to be honest. Planning a wedding's no joke. I sipped my coffee. Wouldn't know. Wasn't invited. He shifted his weight, suddenly uncomfortable. Dad, come on. We talked about this. No, you talked, I said. I listened. He sighed. It's not personal. Lily just wants the day to feel fresh. Not heavy. Is that what I am now? Heavy? He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. I stood slowly and walked back into the house, not slamming the door behind me, but I didn't hold it open either. Let him follow me if he wanted. He did. In the kitchen, I turned to face him. Evan, just tell me the truth. Are you planning to move in here after the wedding? He hesitated. It was slight, half a second, but I saw it. He tried to play it off. We talked about it. Nothing's decided. You told your friends you'd be living here by September. That stopped him. How do you? I hear things, I said flatly. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, it's not a big deal. It just makes sense. You're alone. This place is too much. We could help keep it up. I let that sit for a beat. Funny, I said. Because your version of helping looks a lot like replacing. Dad, he started, defensive now, you're being dramatic. No. I'm being observant. His face tightened, that same look Marjorie used to call his cornered expression. When Evan didn't have a good lie ready, he'd get quiet and hope the silence would speak for him. But I wasn't giving him that out. I know about the planner, I said. The seating chart, the lock changes, the assisted living research. I know everything, Evan. He stared at me, stunned. You went through our stuff? I live here. You left it on my table. He opened his mouth, then closed it. That's when he slipped. Lily just wants to modernize the place, he blurted. It's not like we're kicking you out. There it was. I didn't flinch. You mean, not like you're kicking me out yet? He groaned, frustrated. Why are you making this so hard? You've had your life here. We just want a chance at ours. You don't have to take mine to build yours. His expression softened, just slightly. We didn't mean for it to feel this way. But it does. He didn't stay long after that. Later that evening, my neighbor Martin came by. He's about my age, widower too. We sat on the back steps, splitting a beer and listening to the crickets. You okay? He asked. Not really. He nodded. I saw Evan talking to the bank downtown last week. Didn't think much of it until now. The bank? Yeah. Something about home equity lines. Thought maybe he was co-signing for you. I shook my head slowly. He's trying to leverage something that's not even his. Martin let out a low whistle. That boy's playing a dangerous game. I taught him how to use a hammer, I said. But I never thought I'd have to teach him about consequences. Martin patted my shoulder. You've got time. And he was right. Time was something I still had. And patience. And something stronger than both, purpose. I started pulling out the will that night. I hadn't looked at it since Marjorie passed. It named Evan as sole heir. Of course it did. We were a simple family, back then. No drama, no doubts. But people change. And so do documents. I called the lawyer first thing the next morning. A family friend, Lawrence Bell, older gentleman, quiet but sharp as a tack. He remembered Marjorie's voice even after all these years. When I told him what had been happening, he didn't interrupt. Just took notes. I'd like to make some updates, I said finally. He nodded. I figured. You want to remove him entirely? Yes, I said. Then hesitated. But I want to add a clause. If he contests it, even a whisper of challenge, everything goes to charity. No negotiation. Lawrence looked up, surprised. Are you sure? No, I admitted. But it's the only way to know for certain that he's not in it for love. He wrote it down. I signed the new documents, my hand trembling only slightly. When I walked out of that office, the sun felt different on my face. Lighter, somehow. Like I'd taken something heavy off my back. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But I also knew this, I had given Evan everything, my time, my money, my trust. Now it was time to give myself something back. Dignity. And I wasn't going to let him take that, too. It felt strange, sitting in Lawrence Bell's office again. The last time I was here, Marjorie was beside me, holding my hand as we signed our first will. Back then, everything was clear. We didn't have much, but what we had, we built together. Our plan was simple, leave the house and everything else to Evan. Our only child. The boy we raised with faith and sweat. We never imagined he'd turn into someone who saw us as an inconvenience. Lawrence closed the door gently and gave me a sympathetic look. I've taken care of everything we discussed, he said, sliding a thick folder across the desk. The trust still holds firm on the house and the event property. But as of today, the primary will reflect your new decisions. I took a breath and opened it. There it was in black and white. Evan removed as sole heir. All assets to be donated to the Marjorie Green Foundation for Hospice Care. Contest clause included, any dispute nullifies inheritance and transfers estate to charity. No gray area. No loopholes. Lawrence tapped the document gently. This clause here, it's airtight. If Evan even hires a lawyer to sniff around, the whole thing defaults. He walks away with nothing. Good, I said, though it felt like gravel in my mouth. You sure you want to do this? He asked again. It's final. I've spent my whole life giving, I said. He's had every chance. And now, he's planning to evict me from my own life. Lawrence nodded. I remember when Evan was little. You brought him here once. He spilled lemonade on my carpet. I gave a faint smile. I remember. You didn't even get mad. He was a sweet kid, Lawrence said. Hard to imagine. Me too. He handed me a pen. As I signed each page, something inside me settled. Not joy. Not satisfaction. Just clarity. I wasn't punishing Evan. I was protecting what was left of Marjorie's legacy, and my dignity. After the signatures, Lawrence added one more document to the stack. What's this? Your living directive. Just in case they try to claim you're unfit to manage your own affairs. I raised an eyebrow. You really think they'd go that far? He hesitated. I've seen people do worse over less. I signed it, too. Before I left, I looked around the office, the same dark bookshelves, the old leather chairs. I could almost hear Marjorie's laughter echoing from our last visit, teasing me for being too serious about legal jargon. She would have approved of this. Maybe even insisted on it. Outside, the sky was overcast. The kind of sky that makes everything feel quiet and hollow. I walked past the coffee shop we used to visit after appointments like these. Stared through the window for a moment, watching strangers sip lattes and talk about things that didn't matter yet. I didn't stop in. I drove straight home. When I stepped into the house, something felt different. Maybe it was the weight of finality. Maybe it was just the dust I'd kicked up in the attic the day before. I took the new will and tucked it into the same safe where Marjorie's old letters lived. Then I sat down in the living room, lit a candle beside her photo, and whispered, "It's done." I stared at the flame for a long time. There was no rush of vindication. No swelling pride. Just a quiet acceptance. This was the price of truth. And the cost of loving someone who chose themselves in the end. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about all the birthdays, the bedtime stories, the scraped knees I'd kissed better. I remembered how Evan used to wake up from nightmares and come crawling into our bed. How he used to fall asleep with his hand wrapped around my finger. That boy never would have betrayed me. But that boy was gone. And in his place stood a man who saw his childhood home as a stepping stone. Who looked at me and saw a signature he needed, not a father who raised him. The next morning, I walked around the property with a notebook. Made a list of everything that still needed repair. Fence gate. Porch railing. Back shed. I needed to keep moving. If I stopped, I might start doubting myself. And there was no room for doubt now. Around noon, I got a message from Evan. "Hey, just wanted to check in. We're finalizing things with the venue this week. Hope you're doing okay." No mention of our last conversation. No apology. Just business as usual. I stared at the message, thumbs hovering over my phone. I didn't reply. Let him move forward with his plans. Let them decorate and rehearse and invite everyone but me. Let the illusion stay intact. Because when the day came, when they stepped into that venue, smiling for cameras, thinking they'd won, I'd be there. Not as a guest. As the owner. The final straw didn't come with shouting. No confrontation. No heated exchange. It came in a manila envelope. I found it tucked between my morning newspaper and a real estate flyer, just sitting there on the porch like it didn't carry weight. But the moment I saw the return address, a law office downtown, my stomach sank. I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, typed in cold. Dear Mr. Green. We write on behalf of Evan Green and Lillian Rowe regarding a forthcoming transition plan for the property located at 118 Cypress Lane. Given your age and recent health appointments, our clients believe a voluntary relocation would best support your long-term well-being. A list of local assisted living options has been included. Should you wish to remain involved in decisions regarding the home, we encourage you to initiate that process before September 1st. Sincerely. Marshall and King Legal Group. I read it twice. Then a third time. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a polite shove out the door. No signature from Evan. No note. Just the voice of lawyers telling me I'd outlived my welcome. They were making it official. And they thought I'd go quietly. I walked into the kitchen and set the letter on the table. Then I opened the cabinet, pulled down Marjorie's mug, the one with the faded blue flowers, and made a pot of coffee. I needed something warm to cut through the ice crawling through my chest. I sat there for an hour, staring at the letter, tracing the lines with my eyes like they were cracks in the wall. Part of me still couldn't believe it. I'd raised that boy, fed him, clothed him, sat through every school play, every fever, every heartbreak. And now, through silence and signatures, he was giving me his final answer. Not just, "You're not invited." Not just, "You've had your time." Now it was, "You don't belong here anymore." I went to the hallway closet and pulled out an old suitcase. Not to pack. Just to see how it felt, holding the idea of leaving in my hands. It felt wrong. Every fiber of me rebelled against it. This was my home. My wife's garden still bloomed outside. My workbench still sat in the garage, stained with decades of effort. My knees remembered every creak of these floors. I wasn't ready to be erased. And I wouldn't be. I pulled out the folder again. The trust. The venue deed. The revised will. I checked every detail one last time. Then I called the venue manager, a young man named Adam who'd taken over after the previous caretaker retired. He was polite, efficient, and hadn't realized the ownership hadn't legally changed hands yet. Evan had booked the wedding through a secondary service, never once checking the actual records. "I'm still listed as trustee?" I asked. Adam sounded surprised. "Yes, sir. The trust paperwork is still valid and binding." "Then I'll need access to the property this week." "No problem. Would you like to schedule time before the wedding?" "No," I said, calmly. "I'll be attending." He paused. "Are you on the guest list?" I gave a soft laugh. "No. But I don't need to be." I hung up and felt a strange stillness settle over me. It wasn't anger. Not anymore. It was resolve. There was one thing left to do. I walked into my office and typed up a simple letter. Not legal, not vengeful, just clear. To Evan and Lily. I received your letter. You'll understand, then, why I've made my own preparations. As trustee and legal owner of the event property at Maple Hill, I've decided to attend the ceremony. Not as a guest. As the host. Please plan accordingly. Dad. I printed it, signed it, and drove to the mailbox. And then. I waited. 3 days passed without a word. No call. No text. The silence was louder than any reply could have been. On the 4th day, I heard Evan's car outside. I stayed in my chair, arms crossed. He didn't knock. Just dropped something through the mail slot and drove off. It was a wedding itinerary. No note. No apology. But they hadn't cancelled. That told me everything. They didn't believe I'd show up. Or worse, they believed I didn't matter enough to stop them. Let them decorate. Let them print their name cards, hang their lights, arrange their overpriced flowers. I'd be there. And not a soul in that crowd would expect what was coming. That night, I walked the halls of my home one more time, touching the walls like they were breathing. I stopped at Marjorie's photo. They tried, "Hon," I whispered. But I didn't let them. The sun was out the morning of the wedding, too bright for a day like this. I got dressed slow, methodical. Wore my gray suit, the one I'd kept in the back of the closet since Marjorie's funeral. Brushed my hair. Polished my shoes. Not for vanity, but for presence. If they were going to remember this day, I wanted them to remember who I was. I parked down the hill from the venue, beneath a grove of birch trees. The parking lot was full, SUVs, rental vans, florists, caterers. The entire hillside sparkled with linen and glassware. Strings of lights hung between the barn beams. It looked beautiful. They'd spared no expense. I walked slowly, nodding at the staff, most of whom didn't recognize me. But Adam, the venue manager, spotted me immediately. "Mr. Green," he said, straightening up. "All set?" I nodded. "Everything ready?" "Yes, sir. Staff's been informed." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. You sure you want to go through with it like this? I'm sure. I stood just behind the last row of chairs as the ceremony began. White petals lined the aisle. A quartet played soft strings. Lily walked down in a flowing gown, beaming, holding her father's arm. Evan waited at the altar, hands clasped, jaw tight with nerves, or maybe guilt. He didn't glance around. Didn't look for me. Good. I didn't need to be seen yet. The ceremony moved quickly. Vows, rings, kiss. People clapped. Some wiped tears. The couple turned and walked down the aisle as husband and wife, triumphant and flawless. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The reception started inside the barn. Long tables, gold flatware, handwritten place cards. I recognized many faces, old neighbors, distant relatives, Marjorie's cousins who hadn't visited in years. No one noticed me slip through the side door and step up onto the small platform where a microphone waited for the toasts. I tapped it once. Feedback squealed. Heads turned. Confusion spread like a ripple across the room. Then came silence. Good evening, I said. I won't keep you long. Evan stood halfway out of his chair. Lily's face drained of color. I know I wasn't invited, I continued, voice calm, steady. But as the legal trustee and owner of this venue, I thought I'd welcome you all personally. The room held its breath. Gasps. Whispers. A fork clattered to the floor. This barn, I said, gesturing to the beams above, was part of a trust my late wife and I built. It was passed down to me. And contrary to what many assumed, it still is. Evan never bothered to check the paperwork. He booked this wedding on someone else's foundation. Lily stood now, lips parted but no sound coming out. I don't want to ruin your celebration, I said. So I'll keep it simple. I'm not shutting this event down. Relief flickered across Evan's face. But I am shutting something else down. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter, a copy of the revised will. I held it up like scripture. This is my final will and testament. As of 2 weeks ago, Evan Green has been removed as my heir. Gasps again. Someone whispered, what? If he contests this document in any way, I added, everything, the house, the trust, every asset, will go to charity. I stepped down from the platform. Walked calmly to their table. I raised you to be better than this, I said to Evan. But I can't control who you've chosen to become. He didn't speak. His lips trembled. His hands were clenched at his sides. Lily looked ready to bolt. You could have had a father for life, I told him. Instead, you chose to treat me like a burden. So now, you carry the cost of that choice. I turned, walked out of the barn, and into the open air. Behind me, murmurs grew louder. Chairs scraped. Someone called my name. I didn't turn back. I got into my car and drove away. No one chased me. I took the long way home, past the lake Evan used to swim in as a kid. Past the corner store where Marjorie and I bought root beer floats. The wind through the trees was cool, sharp, like a reminder that truth, once spoken, can never be unsaid. When I got home, I placed the will back in the safe and poured myself a glass of Marjorie's favorite wine. I sat on the porch and waited for night. No messages came. No apologies. And for the first time in months, I didn't expect any. Brain, do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The silence after was louder than I expected. No calls. No knocks. No messages slipped through the door. I thought Evan might at least come storming in, waving papers, demanding an explanation. Or that Lily would send one of her sharp little emails, full of faux concern and veiled threats. But nothing came. And somehow, that was worse. The morning after the wedding, I woke up expecting to feel something: triumph, relief, regret. Instead, there was just stillness. A kind of emotional hangover. The house was quiet, as always, but now it felt like the whole world had taken a breath and held it. I made coffee. Sat by the window. Watched a squirrel pick through the bird feeder. The phone didn't ring. Later that day, I went into town to pick up a few groceries. At the corner store, I caught the tail end of two women whispering by the dairy aisle. "That's him," one said. "The father," the other added. "The one who ruined the wedding." I didn't look at them. Just reached for a carton of milk and moved on. At the register, the clerk, a younger woman named Becca, smiled gently. "My grandfather said you did what a lot of folks wish they could," she said, her voice low. "Don't let M make you feel wrong for standing up for yourself." I nodded, but didn't say much. I was still sorting through the weight of it all. When I got home, I went out to the shed. Cleaned my tools, reorganized some old drawers. It wasn't about being productive, it was about doing something with my hands that didn't require thinking. The smell of sawdust, oil, and earth settled my nerves better than any counselor could. That evening, I found myself on the porch again, watching the wind nudge the trees. The same porch where I used to sit with Marjorie, her hand in mine, sipping sweet tea as the sky turned pink. I missed her something fierce that night. Did I do the right thing? I whispered to the empty chair beside me. Of course, there was no answer. But the candle I'd lit under her photo inside flickered stronger just then, maybe the wind, maybe something else. That week, I kept busy. Repainted the guest room. Donated old clothes. Cleaned out Marjorie's garden bed, finally planting those sunflowers she always meant to. Life didn't stop, not even for betrayal. The town buzzed. I know it did. There's no keeping something like that quiet. Word spreads fast in small places, especially when weddings go sideways. Some folks gave me space. Others gave me sidelong glances. But a few stopped me in the street with quiet nods or firm handshakes, men my age mostly. Widowers. Veterans. Fathers. One old friend, Ray, saw me at the post office. Pulled me aside, real close. "You did what you had to," he said, gripping my arm. "Don't let guilt dress itself up as doubt." I nodded. But even then, doubt was already knocking. Not about the will. Or the venue. Or even the confrontation. It was about Evan. The boy I raised. The son I once knew. I kept playing memories like old records in my mind: fishing trips, baseball games, late-night drives. The time he built me a card tower on Father's Day and cried when it fell over. The time he stayed up with me when I had the flu, putting cold rags on my head just like his mother used to. Was that boy really gone? Or just buried under years of distance and someone else's influence? One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. I didn't recognize the handwriting at first: looped, careful, hesitant. Inside was a drawing. Crayons. A house with a big tree and a swing. And in the corner, a stick figure labeled Grandpa. It was from Emma, Evan's niece, my great-niece by marriage. There was a note, too. "Mom said you're sad. I hope you come to my birthday. You make the best stories. Love, Emma." I sat with that letter for a long time. It didn't fix anything. But it softened something inside me. Later that day, I walked the trail behind the house. Marjorie and I used to take it every Sunday. The same trees, same birdsong. Nature doesn't change the way people do. That thought comforted me. When I reached the clearing at the top of the hill, I sat on the bench we installed years ago. The plaque was still there, slightly weathered. To the days that were simple, and the love that made them so. I closed my eyes. And for the first time since the wedding, I breathed deep without feeling tension in my chest. Maybe I hadn't destroyed anything. Maybe I had just finally stopped pretending. Maybe telling the truth doesn't always come with a parade. Maybe it just comes with peace. As I walked home, the wind picked up. The porch swing creaked gently, as if someone had just left it. I stood there a moment. Then I smiled. It was a Thursday when the idea first came to me, not as a thunderbolt, but a whisper. I was fixing the back gate, replacing rusted hinges when George came by. He's a veteran, like me, retired mechanic. Quiet man, stoops when he walks, but his mind's sharp. We'd known each other from the Legion Hall, always waved, sometimes shared a coffee. That day, he stood at the fence line, watching me work. "You ever think of doing something with this place?" he asked, nodding toward the house. "Doing what?" I wiped sweat from my brow. "Making it useful again. Opening it up." I laughed. "It's already full of ghosts." He smiled, but didn't look away. "Then let the living move in." That stuck with me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote 3 words at the top. Marjorie's House Project. At first, it felt silly. But then I started writing. Ideas poured out. Not wild ones. Just honest ones. What if the house wasn't just mine? What if it became something bigger? A place for people like me. People left behind. Veterans, widowers, folks needing a bed and a meal and someone to talk to. The more I wrote, the more I felt Marjorie's spirit hovering near. She'd always said this house had good bones, not just in the wood, but in the way it held people. It had seen grief and laughter, birth and death, silence and music. It deserved to breathe again. By the next morning, I'd outlined a plan. First, I called Lawrence, not as a lawyer, but as an old friend. I told him what I was thinking. "That sounds exactly like something she'd be proud of," he said. Next, I visited the local zoning office. Explained my vision. A small community boarding house, no more than 6 people at a time. Meals included. Light support. Fellowship. I'd use the event property on weekends for local fundraisers or charity events. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't profit-driven. But it was needed. They gave me the paperwork. I brought it home, spread it across the dining table, and started filling it out with care. It felt good, no, it felt right, to have something to wake up for again. Word got around fast, like it always does. Within a week, 3 veterans from the Legion Hall stopped by asking if I needed help. George came back with 2 boxes of tools. Becca from the grocery store donated blankets. Someone anonymously dropped off a set of brand new pillows. Even the florist who worked Evan's wedding, a young man named Joel, reached out and said, "If you ever need help decorating or setting up events, I'm in." No charge. They weren't family. Not by blood. But they showed up. They stood by me. That mattered more than I knew how to say. Soon, I was busy every day. Clearing out the spare bedrooms. Repainting walls. Fixing leaky faucets. Scrubbing floorboards with vinegar and memory. I opened the attic and found Marjorie's old quilts. Washed them by hand. Folded each one carefully and laid them at the foot of every bed. One morning, while clearing the back storage room, I found a dusty box labeled, "Evan, save someday." It had drawings, school papers, old report cards. A handprint turkey from kindergarten. I sat on the floor with that box in my lap, unsure whether to cry or throw it away. I didn't do either. I closed it gently and placed it in the hall closet, not out of reach, but out of sight. Some wounds aren't ready to be stitched yet. By the 3rd week, applications started trickling in. A man named Richard, 74, widowed. Loves chess. Wanted a place where the nights weren't so quiet. A woman named Anne, 68, retired schoolteacher. Said she just wanted to feel like she mattered again. A young vet, barely 30, who'd lost his legs overseas and didn't want to stay in a VA hospital forever. I read each story with care. And something inside me, the part that had gone numb from disappointment, began to thaw. This house, once nearly taken from me, was becoming something better than I'd imagined. Not a monument to pain, but a shelter for healing. And with each nail hammered, each room cleaned, each letter sent, I felt closer to Marjorie. Like we were building again. Only this time, we were building something not just for Evan, but for everyone else who'd ever been left behind. The first resident moved in on a Tuesday. Richard came with 2 suitcases, a chess set missing a bishop, and a carton of orange juice he insisted on carrying himself. I helped him settle into the upstairs room with the bay window, the one Marjorie used to call the good light room. We stood in silence for a moment after I showed him the closet, both of us unsure what to say. Then Richard looked around and said, "Feels like someone loved this place once." I smiled. Still do. By Friday, and arrived. She brought books, boxes of them, and a jar of homemade strawberry jam. She moved into the corner room with the blue wallpaper. Said it reminded her of the classroom she taught in for 20 years. She cooked the first community dinner that weekend, baked ziti and garlic bread. We ate at the big table in the dining room, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like too much space. A week later, George joined us, not as a resident, but as a volunteer. He came by every afternoon to fix things, tell stories, and sit quietly in the garden. He brought tools and a radio that only played 60s blues. Said it helped keep his hands steady. By the end of the month, the house was alive again. Laughter echoed in the hallways. The smell of stew drifted from the kitchen. The porch swing was never empty. People sat by the fireplace playing cards, reading aloud, or just being. And for the first time since Marjorie passed, I didn't feel alone. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a home again. And not because it was filled with family by blood, but because it was filled with people who chose to care. One morning, I found a note on my bedroom door. "Mr. Green, thank you for not giving up on good things. This house is one of them. Anne." It stopped me in my tracks. Because for a long time, I had given up. Not loudly, not obviously, but in that quiet, tired way only old men understand. I had sat in the same chair each morning, going through the motions, waiting for something that felt like it was never coming back. And now, it had come back. Just not in the way I expected. I didn't hear from Evan. Not directly. But I knew he knew. A neighbor said they saw him drive past the house one afternoon, slow, window down. Said he didn't stop, just looked, then kept going. I didn't wave. I didn't expect him to. I wasn't doing this to make a point anymore. I was doing this because it was right. Because Marjorie would have done the same. Then came Emma. One Sunday afternoon, I heard a knock at the side door. When I opened it, there she stood, clutching a notebook, wearing sneakers too big for her. "Hi, Grandpa," she said softly. I froze. Not out of fear. Just surprise. I hadn't heard anyone call me that in months. She stepped in without waiting for permission, looked around, wide-eyed. "This is the place for my drawing," she said. "The one I sent you." I nodded slowly. "I got it. It's on my desk." She smiled. "Can I stay for a little while?" I let her sit in Marjorie's old chair by the window. She colored while I made tea. We didn't talk about Evan. She didn't bring him up. Neither did I. We talked about her school, her favorite movie, her new kitten named Maple. Before she left, she asked, "Can I come back next weekend?" I nodded. "Anytime." That's when she hugged me. Tight. Not the awkward, polite kind. The kind that feels like a thank you you don't know how to say with words yet. After she left, I sat on the porch for a long time. George joined me after dinner. "She's good for you," he said. "I don't know what I am to her now." George shrugged. "Doesn't matter. You showed up. That's more than most." That night, we had a movie night in the common room. Old black and white westerns. Popcorn in metal bowls. Richard fell asleep halfway through. And knitted through the entire thing. I looked around at the mismatched group of people surrounding me, not one of them related by blood. But they were here. Laughing. Sharing. Living. And I realized something. Family isn't just who you raise. Sometimes, it's who you rise with after you've been knocked down. I had lost a son, at least, the version of him I once knew. But in his place, I had found something else. Something real. Something I could still believe in. It was early October when Evan showed up. The leaves had turned, the air had that crisp edge that makes your joints ache just a little more. I was in the garden, knees in the dirt, pulling weeds from Marjorie's mums. She always said they were stubborn, bloomed late, but bold. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel and looked up. Evan stood at the gate, hands in his coat pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. He didn't open it right away. Just stood there, staring at the house like it might speak first. I didn't say anything either. Just waited. After a moment, he pushed the gate open and walked in. His eyes scanned the garden, the porch, the windows. He looked like someone returning to a town they'd abandoned, not sure if they were welcome or if the ground would still remember their footsteps. "I saw the article," he said. "Which one?" "In the Gazette. About the house project. You turning it into a home for veterans and seniors." He paused. "Said you were doing it in Mom's name." I nodded. "That's right." He walked a little closer, then stopped. "It looks good. Lively." "It is." Silence again. He looked down at his shoes. "I didn't come to fight." "I didn't assume you did." He took a breath. "I came to say. I know I messed up. I stayed kneeling in the dirt. That's a start." "I didn't realize how far I'd gone," he said. "I think Lily. I think I let her voice drown out yours. Mine, too." I stood slowly, dusted off my hands. My knees ached from the ground. From age. From too many hours holding up a house and a heart by myself. "You didn't just let it happen, Evan," I said. "You chose it. More than once." He swallowed hard. "I know." I looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes weren't angry, not even defensive. Just tired. He had shadows I hadn't seen before. For a moment, I saw the boy again. The one who scraped his knee chasing fireflies. The one who used to beg me to read just one more bedtime story. "I thought we were helping," he said. "Making life easier for you. You wanted my house." My silence. "My compliance," I replied. "You didn't ask what I needed. You decided." He nodded slowly, taking it in. "I read your letter," he said. "The one you gave at the wedding." "That wasn't a letter," I said quietly. "That was a boundary." He looked away, hands flexing at his sides. "I didn't come to ask for anything. I needed to see it for myself. What you built. What I walked away from." I motioned toward the porch. "Come on. Let's sit." We didn't talk much. Just sat in the same chairs where Marjorie and I used to spend our evenings. I poured us both tea. He took his with too much sugar, like he always did. He watched the wind stir the leaves in the yard. "Emma talks about you," he said after a while. "She wants to come for Thanksgiving." "She already has a room," I said. "She picked it herself." He smiled faintly. "She misses you." "I miss her too." More silence. Not cold, just full. "I won't contest the will," he said, eyes still fixed on the yard. "I won't fight you." I nodded. "That's wise. I don't expect you to forgive me." I didn't respond right away. Then I said, "Good. Because forgiveness isn't something you get to expect. It's something you live toward." He looked at me. "Can I start?" I studied him. Maybe it was the season, the shedding of old leaves, the preparation for something new. Maybe it was the way his voice trembled, not from weakness but from the weight of finally being honest. "You can visit," I said. "Help in the garden. Talk to the residents. You won't be family by inheritance anymore, Evan. But you might earn it back by presence." He nodded, eyes damp. "I'd like that." We sat until the sun began to dip behind the trees. Before he left, he turned to me one last time. "I'm sorry, Dad." I looked at him, steady and sure. "I'm still here," I said. "That's what matters." And as he walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. Or vindicated. I just felt whole. Not because he came back. But because I hadn't let him break me when he left. Speech balloon, would you have accepted the apology? Share your thoughts in the comments. The ribbon was simple, pale yellow, tied between two porch columns, the kind Marjorie would have picked. No cameras, no speeches, no suits. Just a gathering of folks who knew what the house had become. What it meant. And stood to my left, holding a tray of lemon bars. Richard leaned on his cane beside the new vegetable garden we'd planted out back. George stood tall, his cap pressed to his chest during the moment of silence. We weren't just opening a place. We were honoring a legacy. "Welcome," I said, loud enough for the small crowd to hear, but quiet enough to keep it sacred. This house belonged to a woman who believed that a home should never close its doors to someone in need. And now, it never will again. I cut the ribbon with Marjorie sewing scissors, dull and familiar, and the crowd applauded, soft but sincere. Inside, the house buzzed with quiet joy. Neighbors brought casseroles. Volunteers gave tours. Children tiptoed down the hallway, marveling at the mural Emma helped paint, flowers and stars and the words, "Here, you matter." She insisted on that phrase. "It's what Mom forgets to say sometimes," she told me when we were planning it. Evan didn't attend the ceremony. But he sent a note, handwritten, folded carefully. "Thank you for letting me see what this place could be. I'm learning." Slowly. E. I placed the note in Marjorie's cookbook, tucked between her recipe for apple pie and the one for cornbread. She'd have wanted me to keep it, not for forgiveness, but for memory. That night, after the guests had gone, I walked through each room, checking lights, windows, little details. I'd done it 1,000 times over the years. But this time, it felt different. The rooms weren't quiet. They were full. In the hallway, I passed Richard's door and heard him humming. And was reading aloud to one of the newer residents in the sitting room. George was outside putting the tools away, even though I told him he didn't have to. No one asked to be here. They chose it. And that made all the difference. In the kitchen, I lit a candle and placed it by the window. The same one Marjorie used to stand in front of every evening, watching for Evan's school bus, watching for the moon. I sat with her photo and whispered, "It's alive again, love." And it was. The house that nearly became a battlefield was now a refuge. The place Evan and Lily tried to seize had become something they couldn't even imagine, not just shelter, but sanctuary. Not just bricks and beams, but belonging. A place that kept growing. Each week brought someone new. A man who'd lost his wife in a fire. A woman who used to sing in church choirs but now just needed someone to listen. A boy who aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. They found a door that opened. A porch with a swing. A name on the mailbox that said, "You're welcome here." Sometimes, I still sat alone on the porch. I'd talk to Marjorie under my breath, tell her what was blooming in the garden, who had moved in, what new soup and was experimenting with. I'd tell her about Emma's visits, how she'd started calling the place Grandma's house even though she never got to meet her. And I'd tell her the truth, that I missed her every day, but that I finally understood something she used to say. Legacy isn't about keeping things. It's about giving them away to people who'll love them like you did. I had tried to hold on to this house like it was mine alone. But Marjorie knew better. It was always meant to be shared. Now it belonged to everyone who walked through the door with open hands and tired hearts. And to me? I was no longer just a father with a broken bond. I was a steward. A host. A keeper of memory and mercy. And as I looked out across the porch that night, the porch I once thought I'd lose, I felt peace settle in my bones like an old friend returning home. Because Marjorie's house didn't just live again. It loved again. And so did I.